Scott Moore, my pal from iTalkSEC and the Jay Barker Show, always joins us on Monday for in-depth college football discussion. We're also going to kick in a little bit of NFL today as well, because the sports menu this morning, Scott, is full of tasty choices. This was quite a weekend, wasn't it?
It was, man. I tell you what, it was wow. The playoff game Saturday night obviously was absolutely incredible. You got to give it to Clemson. To me, I thought Ohio State was the better team, and Clemson found a way to win that ball game. And it gets back to the DNA of that program and what Dabo's done. Those guys just believe now that they're going to win every game that they play in. And when you have that ability and that mindset, it's really, really tough to beat you. And then Nolan Turner making the play in the end zone late to seal it for Clemson. And then what can you say about LSU? I mean, I tell you what, Gary, we've been talking about them all year long, but that performance Saturday on that stage, I know Oklahoma's challenged on defense, but man, you're looking at a team that's chasing perfection on offense. I mean, Burrow and LSU right now, they are clicking on all cylinders. The thing that surprised me too, they had a 3-week layoff, and they come back and play the best game they've played all season. So, man, we're set for an amazing championship game with Clemson and LSU down on the Bayou, and a lot of hype going into that game for the next couple of weeks.
Oh, and it's incredible. This is the first year that we've had this kind of 16 days between games, so it's plenty of time to amp it up. And we'll get to Alabama in a moment because I really thought that this would be Alabama's perfect scenario this year to play in Atlanta and then turn around and play in New Orleans with a big break in between games, but it didn't happen. But let's get back to Saturday night's game, because I'm with you. I thought Ohio State should have won the football game Saturday night. I thought they were the better team. I'm with you, too, on Clemson's DNA and Dabo's message that you can prepare for what we do. You can't prepare for who we are. Clemson, the door didn't get closed, and buddy, they kicked it in the second half, and that's what championship programs that win 29 games in a row do. For Ohio State, missed opportunities in the first half. They could have put it away. They didn't. But I do want to get to the officiating, not because that cost Ohio State the game. Even after Clemson went 94 yards or whatever it was to take the lead, they were back there in the end in the position to win the game and couldn't do it. Nolan Turner saving it to Kevin Turner's son for Clemson. But there were a couple calls in the game that, again, just to me, just frame this conversation that we've had about officiating all year. And I just call it, why can't we just take a common sense approach to officiating and make it easier rather than more difficult? Now when you go to replay, you don't trust the replay anymore. You trust the call on the field. Let's first get to the targeting, which was a huge play in the game on Ohio State when Clemson was struggling bad, and that opened the door for them to go down and get a touchdown and kind of get back in the game. The kid blitzed in. Trevor Lawrence is 6'6". He bent down. All right, I know for the letter of the rule it was the correct call, but some context has to be put into this. For the kid to get thrown out of the game, again, I think we've got to revisit this. What we saw in the Oklahoma game, when the Oklahoma linebacker peeled back to hit Hilaire when he wasn't even chasing the quarterback, it was clearly a blindside targeting. This was a guy trying to make a play, Scott. There's got to be some context between a guy trying to make a play and a guy taking a cheap shot, right?
Absolutely, and those are the two examples. One was targeting, and one was a football play. Listen, I understand. We all understand the rule, and we understand why the rules are in place. But that play changed the whole game. If that play doesn't happen, it's 4th and 19. Clemson's still down 16-0. They got to kick it away to Ohio State team that at that time, was running the ball well. Obviously, their tailback hadn't sprained the ankle yet, and J.K. Dobbins put on a show the other night, showed a tremendous amount of heart, and but that was a game changer. That play changed the entire outlook of the ball game, and it was listen, I'm all for revisiting kids getting kicked out of a football game. I mean, you prepare all year long to get in a situation to go play for a championship, to help your football team, and then you get a safety who is a vital member of your team, sent to the sideline for the remainder of the ball game because of that play. And I think maybe sitting out a couple of series or, missing, missing the next series or not being able to play for, a certain amount of time, kind of like you have in hockey. I don't know what you got to do it, but something's got to be done. Knocking a kid out of a game, especially when the kid that hit a layer, that was an absolute cheap shot. It was totally, he was a defenseless player. And when you're dropping back to throw the football and you're being pressured on a blitz, I don't think you're defenseless. Not when you have the ball in your hand and you're under pressure. And I thought Trevor Lawrence dipped his head as well. I don't think it was malicious. I think the kid was making an aggressive play. And, again, we can interpret it all we want, but something's got to be done about this rule, Gary, about kids getting, knocked out of a game for the entire game. I mean, you put too much time and effort in it, and you make one mistake in a game, and it was a mistake. It was not malicious. It's got to be rethought, and the powers that be have got to do something about it.
All right, the other call. Clemson had taken the lead in the second half. I think it was 21-16 at the time.
Yeah.
And Trevor Lawrence threw a pass to T. Higgins. Jeff Okudah, who is a terrific cornerback, long-armed. It looked like, to me, it was a clear catch. Higgins caught the ball. His momentum was pushing him backwards, but he took what I thought was 3 steps. The ball was stripped away. It was picked up and returned for a touchdown. It was ruled a touchdown on the field. That same crew that worked the Iron Bowl and had some controversy surrounding it, they go to replay and it's reversed. Now, a lot of these people that are hired as officiating analysts were saying, well, it's the correct call based on the rule. Well, then the rule's stupid. All right. Then the rule, this is what I'm talking about, common sense. Well, he's got to make a football move. He's got to turn his shoulders. And he made a football move. He caught the ball. He was getting shoved. He took 3 steps backwards. I'm sorry. That's got to be a catch. That rule's got to be changed. If you have to turn and go the other way for it to be a football move, then that's my point. Maybe they got the call right through replay, but if they got it right, then that's a stupid rule. When somebody clearly catches the football, gets driven back 3 steps, fumbles the ball, the whistle had not been blown, and that's called a non-catch, what are we doing? Where's the common sense involved here, Scott?
Yeah, first of all, you're right. He caught the ball, and a football move was impossible because Okudah had him wrapped up. He caught it, possessed the ball with his hands, and was being pushed forward, which to me is a freaking football move. Okay, he dislodged the ball. It was picked up and run in. And listen, that was if you're an Ohio State fan, you're going to remember that call the rest of your life, because that call changed the entire complexion of the game as well. And it was a horrible call. It was a terrible call. And when I heard the ref or the in-studio guy that kind of talks about all this, look, these refs, let's also keep this in mind, okay? These guys are going to stick together on what they think. They're not going to go against one another in the booth up there, and the guy that's the replay official in the booth, he's not going to go against the people that are making the calls at Birmingham or whatever. But that was terrible. That was an awful call. It was caught. He took a football move, 2 steps. I thought maybe 3, like you said, but he possessed the ball with his hand. And when you look at it full speed, there was no question about it. And then to replay it and still get it wrong, that's the problem that we got. It goes back to the kick, the field goal attempt at Auburn this year. Officials cannot decide football games. And I think that's what we're all trying to get here. It is not up to the officials to decide championship football games when so much is on the line. Get it right. Get the call right. They didn't get it right. They blew it, and Ohio State gets a touchdown taken off the board that at the end of the day probably would have made the difference in the ball game.
Well, as I said, my thought is this. We've got to try to make this simpler rather than more.
I totally agree.
And the problem with all this stuff, either it's a catch or it's not a catch. It doesn't, well, he's got to make a football move. No, he either catches the ball or he didn't. That needs to be the only thing we're focused on. He caught the ball, clear as day.
He caught the ball.
and Clemson might have still won the game, but some of this scrutiny on officials, we're bringing it on them, and I'm talking about, the world of college football, by having a bunch of dumb rules. And replay, to me, has complicated the game more than it's made it simple. Hey, listen, we got to get to the break, Scott. Aaron, continue to hold. I know you're being patient with us, but we will get to you when we come back on the other side of this break on the Bud Light Hotline. But we got to hit our break on time. This hour being brought to you by the Gary Harris Show. More with Scott Moore from iTalkSEC and the Jay Barker Show. Also, phone calls on the Bud Light Hotline at 205-342-9904. Keep it tuned right here to Tide 100.9. Visiting with Scott Moore from iTalkSEC and the Jay Barker Show. Aaron is gone again. Aaron, listen, I'm sorry, but if you call back in, we'll try to get you on. We just have to get you when we can get to you. We were discussing Clemson and Ohio State. Clemson again, and you know how I feel about some of the Daboisms. To me, they're getting tired. I mean, I'm just you know, but you can't deny what he has built there, and seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, when he took over after Tommy Bowden in the middle of the season, it was questionable whether or not the guy was going to make it, 3 or 4 years, and they stayed with him. And now they're one win away from, and you could argue now that they've already supplanted Alabama, but they're one win away, particularly if they were to beat this LSU team, of taking full spot on the Mount Everest of college football. Hey, Scott, let's go ahead and get to Aaron because he's been trying to get through to you. Aaron is with us on the Bud Light Hotline. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Gary. Boy, do I agree with you about Dabo Swinney. He has not worn the crown very well. It's a little bit too much mouth for a guy that has a background, a walk-on at the University of Alabama many, many years ago. But what I wanted to talk to you about, I don't want to monopolize it this morning, two different things. Number one is the SEC's contract coming up with the CBS network. Mm-hmm. There and the possibility that the SEC will not have its own network for the football games there. And I realize that there's supposedly a difference in the money, but I think there's a lot to be said when you've got 14 schools being, as the cliche would be, advertised by such a network. And, of course, we get publicity not only on Saturday when we're playing football games there, but when they advertise what is going to be on Saturday when we have football games. And the other thing is I understand as the contract reads and is applied there with CBS that each of the 14 schools will be in there on the prime spot on Saturday afternoon to get the, so to speak, maximum publicity there. And I'm afraid that if we get in with a big pool, a bigger pool, through ESPN and Disney and et cetera like that, that it will hurt the, I hate to call them have-nots, but the Arkansas and the Ole Miss and Mississippi State and South Carolina and Kentucky's, because they won't be pushed to the forefront there and get all that positive publicity there. What do you think?
All right, Aaron, let's get Scott in on this too. And first of all, I think you make great points. I'm 100% in agreement with you. And I understand that CBS has been they've had one of the most incredible deals with the SEC that you could ever ask for, and they were going to have to pay more. Having said that, they did not want to pay the price that the SEC asked. But Scott, I agree with Aaron. I think you're going to lose something beginning in 2024 or whenever this deal is over with CBS, and you go to ESPN, ABC, and you're already the worldwide leader. Already has its paws and everything. But having your own over-the-air major network dedicated to your conference with the CBS game of the week, I think that's special. And you may get a little more money from ESPN and ABC and Disney, but to have an entire one of the CBS broadcasting network, your network promoting your game all week during its prime. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I saw the Iron Bowl promo before the game, during CBS primetime programming, during CBS Sports NFL. I like it. I like the SEC Saturday afternoon game of the week being exclusive with CBS. Yes, ABC, ESPN's incredible, but now we're with everybody else. And Scott, I'm interested in what you think. I agree with Aaron. I think the SEC is going to lose a little something when it doesn't have that Saturday afternoon 2:30 spot with CBS every week.
I think that it will too. It's been we go back to the CBS intro, which is such a that's just such an iconic opening to football games on Saturday. It's like the tradition that opening has been around for 30 years, Gary, 31 years. And you knew something special was happening when you heard that music come on. And particularly with the SEC I believe they've been carrying games now since 1996, I believe, in that spot. That's a whole generation that's used to that. So, yeah, there'll be some changes. I think the good thing is, though, the flip side of it, and I totally agree with you, but the flip side, and I'll try to look at it from that side, is that, college football really began with ABC. They were the ones that got everybody interested in college football back in the 60s. And, Alabama and Ole Miss were the first ever primetime game in 1969 that was ever played in primetime on national TV 50 years ago. And they kind of, with Keith Jackson, the iconic broadcasters, the big games throughout the years, and then, obviously the playoff too. So with ESPN owning the playoffs, playoff expansion on the horizon, and all that stuff, I think ABC and ESPN are really gearing up to take this thing maybe to the next level. There's always been some criticism with CBS about the 2:30 kick, only being able also to have one game in prime time, during the entire year. And that's crazy that you can only get one game on prime time. And this year they took Georgia and Notre Dame and missed out on Alabama, LSU. So I think that's going to open up the door for more primetime games, more night games for people, particularly early in the year when it's really ridiculously hot out there and people are like going, why are we playing 11 and 2:30 games when it's 98 degrees? I think they're going to address that finally. So I think on the other side of it, they're going to tweak it and try to make this better. And as long as they're trying to do that, and the exposure standpoint and all that, and as you know, the games will be played on ABC Network along with the ESPN platform too. But these games will be a national broadcast, more opportunities for more eyes to get on the conference as well. So I think there'll be some good things, but I'm like you. It's going to be very, very hard to be able to do all this in 2023.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Aaron, for the phone call.
Good deal. Thanks. Enjoyed the show here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And Scott, I hear you make good points. I'm still in the CBS corner. I just think that's a special.
Yeah, I agree with you. Me too. I'm just trying to look at.
Yeah, you're still going to have 11 o'clock games. You're still going to have 2:30 games. Those time slots aren't going to go away. Yeah, maybe you'll have a little more flexibility as far as putting the best game in prime time. But you're still going to have guys playing all times during the day. Let's get to another phone call, and before we get to this break, this is Jim is with us on the Bud Light Hotline. Good morning, Jim.
Hey, you talk about missed calls. Did y'all see that play where A.J. McCarron took that slide and got hit?
Yeah, he got it. They missed a call. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah. Now, that's inexcusable because, they're looking at the play. I mean, one of the refs has got to be looking at the end of at the guy with the ball in his hand, and that was just so obvious. So that's just, but as far as instant replay, I'm one that just wish they'd get rid of it, because, even they got it now and people disagree, like you may think something like that one no catch you said with the catch. Well, half the people, whatever's going to think it the other way. So just let the game be called, live, and whatever happens. I mean, because even with instant replay, people still get mad, can't agree that it was actually the right call. So just get rid of it completely.
Yeah, Jim, you make a good point. Here's the problem. Replay can help the game. As I said, right. I think the key is you just got to simplify the rules. There's got to be a common sense approach. Just like the game with Clemson and Ohio State. The guy caught the football. All right, all this stuff about what's a football move stuff. Just like in the Alabama-Auburn game, the Iron Bowl. The replay was used, and basically the replay affected the game because there needs to be a rule that simply states this: if you have 1 second to go and no timeouts, there's no way to get a snap off. They give the replay so much leniency, Scott and Jim, that they put the replay official in a tough spot, and he winds up impacting the game. There just needs to be a simple rule that if it's a football, if he catches the ball and it's knocked out, it's a fumble. Just decide whether or not he caught it, not how many steps he took or whether he turned his shoulders. And in college football, there needs to be be a simple rule. If there's a second left, there's no way to get a snap off. Then the official in the replay booth couldn't overturn it. What happens, I think, is that there's so much discretion with replay that you put them in a tough spot. Everybody knows in football, you can't throw a play in the field of play. And even if you get a first down, the clock stops momentarily, and get a snap off in 1 second, Scott, but they're letting the replay booth have so much discretion that it's just impacting the game negatively. Just come up with some good rules and use the replay to get it right, rather than when we go to replay, now we got all this discretion.
Yeah. And the easiest thing to do at the end of a game like that is to add a 5-second runoff. If the clock stops for any reason, a player falling down, that ridiculous call where, Gus he was able to get the entire field goal unit on. If you have a 5-second runoff at the end of the game or at the end of the half because you're out of timeouts, that eliminates it right there.
Don't the NFL?
Go ahead, Jim.
Don't the NFL have that rule, don't they? I think the NFL does have.
Yeah, the NFL's got a 10-second runoff. Yeah, if there's a penalty on the offense and it's they don't have any timeouts, they run it off 10 seconds. It allows them not to use a penalty to get an extra play.
Yeah, but don't the NFL also have a rule that if it's a replay review, there's a 10-second runoff too?
Well, they may have, and I'd have to check on it. But if they do, it's a good rule because you're right. You should not be able to use what Auburn was able to do in that. What Auburn was able to do in that Iron Bowl was just get a bonus timeout. Period. They got 4 timeouts in that half, so that's got to be. So again, I'm not necessarily criticizing the official based on the stupid rule. But just fix, like Jim said, Scott, just fix the rule, whether it's a runoff or have a rule where you can't get a snap off with 1 second so that Auburn doesn't, in essence, give Malzahn credit for manipulating the officials and getting a free timeout and a chance to kick a field goal, which turned out to be the difference in the game.
And listen, I got to be honest, the having an analyst that's available in the booth to sit there and give a commentary on it, because it's his opinion. And we don't all. Listen, I didn't agree with the guy's opinion at all the other night, okay? I'm tired of hearing from replay officials in the booth, okay? I'd rather not hear from them. I think that's a complete waste of time, because most of the time we don't get the right information that we need to make the call. And the bottom line is everybody in the booth the other night missed the call, including the replay guy that was making the commentary on it. It was ridiculous. Don't tell us what we already see, okay? Don't tell me. Give me a different opinion on what I know is fact right there. A guy caught the ball. Guy was being drugged down or in the grasp of Jeffrey Okudah, and he forced the fumble. That is what happened on that play. And there's really no interpretation of that. That's what happened. Don't tell me about football moves and this or that. We know what a catch looks like, okay? There are 20 million people watching that game the other night, and most of them know what a football play is. That was a catch. And it was a fumble, and that's all there is to it. And again, the other thing that we talked about this morning that's got to be addressed: a targeting rule on a situation like that. Look, if you go cheap shot somebody, you go take their head off. Maybe you should sit out the entire rest of the half, and maybe the next game. But when you're in the middle of a football play in a big time moment, and you're a game changing play, you can't kick guys out of the game for being aggressive. You can't do it. Something's got to be done about that.
Hey, thank you, Jim. Appreciate the phone call.
All right.
Good to hear from you. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Scott. That's something I was saying Saturday is, this is a violent sport. It just is. That's the reality of it. I know you want to make it as safe as you can make it, but injuries are going to happen. Contact is unavoidable, and you start what I call watering down the game. Defensive guys have to be allowed to play aggressive. They have to be allowed.
It was a great call. It was a great call on defense. It forced a 4th and 19. You got pressure on the quarterback. You affected the quarterback. He got popped pretty good. Chase Young got the top of him. He was been up pretty good on that play. Trevor Lawrence was. Give that kid a ton of credit for coming back and playing the way he did. But that was a game-changing outcome play. If Clemson doesn't score there and Ohio State gets the ball back and you're punting away, Ohio State then has the ball up 16 instead of the game being 16-6 or 16-7 3 plays later. It was a total game changer for momentum in the ball game. Total game changer. Both plays were.
All right, let's get to Mike real quick here while he's waiting on the Bud Light hotline. Mike, you're on with Scott Moore and, of course, obviously Gary Harris. Good morning.
Well, I appreciate you taking my call. I love hearing y'all on Mondays. But my comment was, can the playoff committee send Auburn a huge thank you? Because I fully think if Alabama had even beaten Auburn, Oklahoma would have still had that 4th spot. And can you imagine the outrage that committee would be going through today had they picked Oklahoma over Alabama?
Yeah, Mike, I think that's up for discussion. I still feel like, and Scott, I think may agree with you. I still think if Alabama had won that Iron Bowl, they'd have gotten that 4th spot. That's just my opinion. Scott, what do you think?
It had been a strong debate. I think they're moving Alabama to 13th. I think this committee, honestly, I think they were tired of Alabama. I think fatigue really set in this year. But here's the funny thing about that. There are 5 teams in the SEC that are better than Oklahoma, okay? Take LSU away from it. Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Auburn, all of them would beat Oklahoma. And all of them would beat Oklahoma badly. And let me tell you, put Tennessee and Oklahoma on a neutral field right now, and it'd be a battle. It'd be a war. So Oklahoma, again, in the era that we're in right now and the dynamics that we're dealing with, the fourth team in this deal is virtually got no shot to win. Alabama was fortunate a few years ago; they were number 1 all year, got there as a 4th seed, and won the thing. But man, we have had in these semifinals, every single semifinal, somebody has got their tail handed to them every single year, and everybody's talking about expanding the playoff. I don't know what we got to do to tweak the system to fix it a little bit better. But, listen, there were 3 really great teams in college football this year, and everybody else was kind of trying to figure out who number 4 was. But, Gary, I'm kind of with – if Alabama had beaten Auburn and just won that game and got out of there, I think they would have gotten the playoff.
Here's the thing, Mike and Scott, you're right. Had Oklahoma gone in, had Alabama won that Iron Bowl and was sitting there at 11-1, and Oklahoma got in and took that beating they got, you're right. It would be it would be a major discussion. Here's the hiccup, and this is why I'm still in favor, and we got to get to the break, but here's why I'm still in favor of expanding the playoff. You get more teams in. I think you may still have a blowout, but if it's 1 versus 8, a blowout sounds a little bit better. This obsession with, well, they didn't even win their conference championship. They didn't even make their conference championship games. That's what's killing us, as we've said before. And all conferences are not created equal. It should be about getting the 4 best teams, or, in my opinion, the 8 best teams. I just think then, if you people are obsessed with conference champions, if you've got 8 spots, that gives you more room for your conference champions, and it also gives you more room, Scott and Mike, for more deserving teams. There's still going to be some blowouts occasionally, but I would rather have 8 teams and we cull them down, and then you get through 4 teams winning a game and getting to the semifinals than having better teams not even in the playoff. And there's no doubt now that Oklahoma wasn't the 4th best team, whether it was Alabama or Oregon, another one of these 2 lost teams. But we're never going to get that with 4 teams because there's so much pressure on that committee to spread the wealth, and you've only got 4 slots to do it. That's why I'm in favor of expanding the playoff.
Yeah, exactly. And this year, there's too much talk this year about the 4 most deserving teams. That's not supposed to be what the committee is not charged with putting the 4 most deserving teams in the playoff. It is the 4 best teams, regardless of conference. And listen, the SEC this year, they had 3 teams that could have made some real noise in the SEC or in the college football playoff. But right now, let's say I think the 2 best teams in America, though, have emerged. That's what we've gotten most of the time. Moving forward in the national title game, we've gotten the 2 best teams at the end of the year most of the time, I think pretty much every time. So I think that's what the playoff is designed to do, is to get the 2 best teams to play for a national title after getting to the 4 best. All
right, Scott,
teams.
listen, we got to get to the break. We're way over. Yeah. Here's what we're going to need to do. Because I do want to get into Freddie Kitchens' discussion with you. Now we haven't even talked to Alabama, so let's get to our break. Let's come back, close out this first hour, then you hang around for that first segment of the second hour, and we can and talk a little bit of Crimson Tide this playoff, and rightfully so. One other thing, Scott, real quickly before we go to the break, that I found out, because I'm usually, as you know, with Alabama in the playoff, covering the playoff, but Saturday morning I got up and watched game day, and it's more apparent than ever. If you're not in the playoff, you're not relevant. It doesn't even. Yeah. They don't even waste a breath on you, man. Alabama's got to get back in the playoff. All right, we'll be back. All right, hour number 2 of the Gary Harris Show is on the air. We got another segment with Scott Moore. Lively discussion in that first hour. Rodney Orr coming up at 10:15. Kayla Anderson coming up at 10:30. We can take some more phone calls with Scott. But, Scott, we came back from that break. We lost you for a moment. But before we move on to Alabama, I quickly was saying that, and we'll have plenty of time for analysis of Clemson and LSU. And Clemson's a phenomenal team, and I never would have dreamed that they would have been able to do what they've done under Dabo Swinney. Still, I think for Clemson in this game, they're going to need to play perfect, which they're capable of doing, and Trevor Lawrence is a brilliant quarterback. But if Joe Burrow continues to play like he's played all year, it's going to be tough for anybody to beat LSU, and they've got a chance to stake their claim, in my opinion, as if they win this game, as the greatest college football team of all time. When you look at the schedule, to go 15-0, I mean, big opportunity for both these teams.
Yeah, well, listen, it's going to be hard to beat them. Listen, LSU's just had a magical season. It's all come together. They've had injury luck. They've had, they've been able to. I mean, just whatever situation they have faced, they flourished in it. They won a tough game against Auburn at home. People forget though, LSU. I don't think LSU was ever in danger of losing that game. They moved the ball up and down the field, struggled a little in the red zone. Field was bad that day, but Auburn held them to 23 points, and they won a knock you out, ground out game there, and then they won some. The win over Tuscaloosa over Alabama, though, set the tone for their year. They got over the hump in that ball game, and they have progressively gotten better. They had a little bit of a hiccup against Ole Miss. I thought they were tired emotionally, physically, and John Rice Plumlee kind of made them look a little average. But Gary, the thing about them, they have gotten so much more complete on defense down the stretch. They have played lights out. Their team is playing with a level of confidence right now that very few teams are. And it's just a special year, and Burrow has put together the greatest season by any quarterback in the history of college football. And that is a bold statement. And what that guy did on Saturday, if LSU had wanted to Saturday, I believe they could have scored 100 points on Oklahoma. I really do. I mean, they literally had to keep and slow the game down just to try to get out of there and preserve the rest of their players so they could just get out of that game without getting anybody hurt. That was flawless what they did on Saturday. They were unstoppable. And you're right. Steve Litton, their legacy is one of the greatest of all time. If they beat Clemson, then they're going to lay stake to that because an SEC team or an SEC conference football team, the SEC's never seen a 15-0 team ever. So there you go. You just said it in a nutshell.
All right, let's get to Alabama. The Alabama's finding out how the other side lives. First time ever not in the college football playoff. And in Orlando, which is a great place to be this time of the year, and the Verbo Citrus Bowl is a nice game. You got Michigan with Jim Harbaugh, but that's another reason for expanding the playoffs, Scott, is just you're either in the playoff or you're not. And when you're not, I mean, just nobody cares. I mean, Alabama fans want to see them win the game. Alabama certainly wants to win the game, but around the country, Alabama right now is an afterthought. And I know a lot of people are happy about that. But still, they have a game to play Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. against Michigan. I don't think you ever really know as a media person or a fan how your team is prepared until they go out and you see how they play. Because I've heard, players say all the right things, and I've told people, man, this team's ready to play, and they go out and they get undressed. So I think the bottom line for Alabama, Scott, and I'm curious if you agree, is if they're prepared to play and they have put their time in and they're where they need to be mentally, they're better than Michigan, they'll win the game. If not, they could lose it. How do you think this Alabama game is going to come out on Wednesday, this Alabama team, and play in this game? Do you think they'll be ready to go?
I do, Gary. I think the Auburn loss has really stung. I think it's kind of gotten in their system a little bit. I think with the team meeting, right after that game, before I think it was before the banquet they had in Birmingham, I think they said, you know what, we don't like the way we finished. A lot of guys look like they may come back now and try to make even a more dramatic statement in 2020. And so I think this team wants to prove it's still one of the better teams in the country. You're also playing to get to 11 wins, which I think this would be, 10 straight years with 11 wins or more. That is amazing in this day and age of college football. And then you get yourself right and sent off for 2020. Again, I think a lot of juniors that we all thought were foregone conclusions, 4 or 5 months ago, would all be heading out and getting ready to stake their claim. And as you mentioned, playing for a national title and all that. The dynamics of this team has changed with Dylan Moses' injury and Tua Tagovailoa's injury. A lot of guys feel like they've got unfinished business at this university. So I think this is really the start of the 2020 season. I think Nick Saban's playing it that way. I think the players are as well. I like the work they put in over the last 2 weeks. And the bottom line is I think Alabama's a better football team than Michigan is, even minus the injuries or whatever. And listen, all the 9 guys, the 9 freshmen that played on defense now, and these guys are no longer true freshmen. They've been in the program a year. It's time to take your game to the next level. A lot of guys too, Gary, I think worth noting right now, we have seen a lot of players take these 14 practices that they get there in bowl time and just take their game to a next level. We've seen it happen in the past. I think there'll be some guys that will probably have their best games on Wednesday. And if Alabama does what it's capable of doing and they don't turn the football over, I think Alabama's got a really good chance to beat Michigan pretty handily.
Let's just real quickly look back at this season. Alabama went in as one of the favorites to win the national championship. Incredible quarterback, dynamic group of wide receivers, unbelievable offense. We knew there were some questions on defense. Injuries certainly played a huge part, but still, they had an easy schedule. They had 2 games that dictated the season, and they lost them both. And, I know Tua wasn't 100% against that LSU, but it's gone from not being 100% to now he was playing on one leg. I understand fandom, okay? But Tua was well enough to play in the game. He did not play well in the first half. The layoff contributed to it. And then he didn't play at all against Auburn. But still, Alabama offensively in that game was good enough. Both those games were mistakes. And those are mistakes that these Alabama teams under Nick Saban didn't used to make. Other teams made them. And it's a fine line, as you know, when you're playing in big games against good opponents between winning and losing. And at the end of the day, even with Tua's health issues, this came down to Alabama made too many mistakes. They had a pick 6 against LSU. They had 2 of them against Auburn. Defensively, they had some bust. They didn't tackle well enough. Missing field goals and extra points and all the things that we've seen with the kicking game. That's the bottom line here. If Alabama plays clean in both of those games, I think certainly they would have beaten Auburn. They would have had a chance to beat LSU, and they would have been in the playoff. And that's what has to be fixed. The talent is not an issue here. Even with the injuries, Alabama had enough talent. Am I being too simplistic here, or is that
No. I think simplifying that. Well, we always say this, and I said this on Twitter the other night. The Clemson game the other night came down to about 5 or 6 plays in the first half, of which 3 or 4 of them went Clemson's way. Right. This season for Alabama, an entire season, okay, it came down to about 5 plays, and all 5 plays went against Alabama. Tua's fumble at the goal line against LSU probably changed the game. The turnover with 12 men on the field probably took away a possession, took away points on the game. 3 plays at Auburn that if you make those plays or they don't happen, you win. So I can't remember an Alabama season like this one coming down to about 5 plays, and obviously Tua's injury would be one of those plays, right? So 5 plays this year is the difference between Alabama playing in Orlando or playing for a national title. That's how fragile a season is, and that's how close it was for this team this year. You make those 5 plays, as you said, execute like you have in the past, and do what you're supposed to do. Be disciplined. You're probably playing for a title this year. There's not another team in America, Gary, that can make that claim. Nobody can say, you know what, 5 plays here, and we're probably playing for the national championship. Alabama can say that, and that is an absolutely legitimate argument right there. So a season is fragile, and when you don't do what's expected of you, like go play for a title, it's all about, hey, what if and what might have been. Hopefully, though, everything that's happened this past year, all the injuries, all the youth, I think that's going to be a major plus going into 2020. I expect a lot of great players that were probably headed to the NFL to come back and be part of this team, some really key names. And I think Alabama's got a chance to go into 2020 and reclaim its spot as the best football program in America. I think they got to have every opportunity in 2020 to do that.
Yeah, and the margin for error next year will be slim as well. In this conference, you either make the plays or you don't. And in those three big games that decide your season, if you don't make them, you're in the Citrus Bowl and not in the playoff. All right, I want to get your thoughts on Freddie Kitchens real quickly. I like Freddie. Know him a little bit. Have had him on Tider Insider TV when he was an assistant in college, and a great guy. Was so excited for him, and I bought in too. I love the offseason when he was saying all the right things. If you're not in the locker room, you don't matter, and wearing the dog pound sweatshirts. Bottom line, at the end of the day, it's disappointing, but I don't have any problem with the Browns letting him go. I mean, you got a nice roster. Right. You finished 6-10. You lost to the worst team in football yesterday, and it did have the appearance from the outside looking in that it was just disorganized. It was chaotic, and I do think this is a case of maybe Freddie getting that job because the players were excited about him last year, but he really probably wasn't ready to be a head coach in the NFL, and that's not a knock on him. There's a lot of these guys that aren't, and in this case, that it didn't finish well, and it doesn't matter how many times you fired a coach, and it doesn't matter how many times you've been bad. These guys are hired to do a job, and when you don't do it, Haslam's got a ton of money. They're going to try to find somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're on a short leash in the NFL now anyway. I mean, it used to be 2 or 3 years, even with college football, 2 or 3 years. It's win right now or else, and that's just the pressure we live in. It's in this, hey, I want gratification now society we're part of. But you're right. Hiring Freddie last year was a stretch. And going to that organization, Gary, we already know that is a disorganized organization. You would expect different from the Haslam family. I mean, they've been a dynasty in business for years and years and years. You would just expect better. But there are some franchises in this league, Washington Redskins is another one, Detroit another one, that they just can't get out of their way from a management standpoint. And if you're a head football coach, those are probably 3 of the worst teams that you'd want to go try to start your career or build your career in. There's discontent in the locker room. There are players. The leadership in the locker room at Cleveland is terrible. You have Myles Garrett kicked out of the league indefinitely. So you lose your best player on defense. You got a guy like OBJ who should have never been brought in. That was the first mistake, bringing in a malcontent like that, who's never happy and makes your locker room toxic. So he had all those factors going against him. And then hype in the start of the season that was totally, totally ridiculous. Calling them a Super Bowl team and this team is going to do this, and that, when they've never done this, and that. That was the problem right there. So Freddie will land on his feet, and dang good coordinator. He'll end up getting another shot somewhere. Certainly as a coordinator, and it may be a while before he's a head coach again. But Freddie's got a good track record in the NFL, and I think it's going to work out pretty well for him in the end. But for him, I think this might be a relief in the end, Gary. Not coaching at Cleveland's probably a good thing for Freddie Kitchens.
All right, and finally, we're up against the clock, Scott, but I'm really happy for Derrick Henry. He was one of my favorite guys to cover here at Alabama. Down to earth, business-like, wasn't overly friendly, but, was genuine. And caught a lot of flack when he won the Heisman from the Bama haters, and then he went in the second round and didn't get off to a great start in his pro career, mainly because he wasn't given an opportunity. You and I both know he's a volume ball carrier. He gets better throughout the game. And then this year, to win the rushing title, even missing a game, to finish up with 211 yards and 3 touchdowns yesterday, I'm just thrilled. And, either you can play or you can't play. And this guy could play, and this is the reason this guy took Alabama to a national championship in 2015. It's a reason now he's put the Titans on his back, and they're in the playoffs. And I'm happy for him, because to be that physically gifted and work as hard as he's worked and have so many detractors and so many just antagonists, for you to get the last laugh as a football player, it's got to feel good for him. And I know I feel good for him. He's a great football. Let's not beat around the bush here. He's not average. He's not good. He's a great football player.
Hey, man, this guy broke Herschel Walker's career rushing record in the SEC. First of all, let's look at that, or the single season rushing record in the SEC. And he's in great company there. He'll always remember as one of the greatest players in Alabama history, SEC history. What he's done at the next level is phenomenal. Consummate professional, consummate gentleman, and one of the hardest working players and most humble guys in all the league. And, Gary, he is going to get paid in 2020 a hefty amount of money to carry the rock.
And I'm glad to see Mike Vrabel go ahead and give him an opportunity to get that title, rushing title, because it's going to cost the Titans more money if they keep him. But that's a rare opportunity for a player and for an organization. And just kudos to Derrick Henry, man. He's earning his money. Hey, Scott, great stuff. We could probably just do the 2 hours with you today. There's so much to cover. But folks, follow Scott on Twitter at iTalkSEC. Listen for him on the Jay Barker Show, and of course, catch him on his show, iTalkSEC Radio. Thanks, Scott.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Always great kicking off Mondays with you, buddy.